Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Rise of Justice Movement, the podcast. My name is Zachary Mallory, and I am the founder and the host of the Rise of Justice Movement and the Rise of Justice Movement, the podcast. All right, so today I am interviewing another candidate for our candidate series, and this time we're taking a journey into Washington. Brent, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, it's an honor. And you know what? Let's dive right in. So, walk us through, who you are, why you're running at a time that we need to get progressive voices elected at all levels of government, but especially in Congress. And, just walk us through who you are and your background.
Well, yeah, I'm Brent Hennrich, running for Congress here in Washington's 3rd Congressional District, which is, for those who don't know, we're about 7,600 square miles, and we're the almost entire southwest corner of the state of Washington. So we go from the Pacific Ocean all the way to the Cascade Mountain Range, and then we go from the Columbia River up to just south of our state capital of Olympia. So we cross over 7 counties, and it's just I'm running to make sure that we have representation that Southwest Washington deserves and that Southwest Washington thought they were voting for in the last 2 election cycles. And unfortunately, we haven't gotten that representation. So after outcry from constituents and talking to my family, I'm stepping up to make sure that we can get that representation.
Absolutely. And, first of all, thank you for running because it's imperative that we get these voices elected. And, the current incumbent, like you said, for your district is not representing the people. I think we all know who she's representing. And it's definitely not the people of Washington. That is for absolute sure. So, whenever it comes to, you've been out talking to people in the community, what are some of those concerns that you're hearing as far as issues within your district that the current incumbent is not addressing?
Well, I mean, one thing that is absolutely every day loud and clear is our incumbent is just totally missing the mark on ICE. She's consistently voted every single time the Republicans have brought up to increase ICE's power, increase ICE's budget, to leave them without checks on their power. She's voted with the Republicans on that. And ICE is terrorizing our district and terrorizing this entire country. So way out of step there. She's been out of step on healthcare. She, stood with the Republicans to, hurt the Democrats' bargaining position on the government shutdown at the end of last year. She was just like, no, we can talk about healthcare another day. Now we have people they can't afford their health care and are no longer covered all over our district and again all over this country. She's been out of step, on women's rights. She voted for the SAVE Act that was obviously going to limit access to the ballot for people who change their name, primarily married women, those in the LGBTQ community that have changed either via marriage or just for their own safety. So it's been consistent that she has been out of step with the voters that voted for her. And I agree, you have to represent a whole district. We are in a purple district, but you also have to stand up for, what your core base that did the work that got you elected believes in. And there's only so much backstabbing that a base is going to tolerate. And they have cried out, they've had enough. And we know she can't win in November. We know that 20% of the base say they will never vote for her again under any circumstance. So if we're not successful, if we don't get the support early and get ahead in the primary, then we know this seat automatically defaults to a MAGA supporting Republican. And we don't want that. So we're running to give the people an alternative option.
Mhm. Absolutely. I think it's also worth noting that she was one of 42 Democrats who voted in favor of the, FISA, which was a surveillance program opposed by civil liberties and free press advocates. She was one of the 42 that voted for that. Like you said, also voted for the SAVE Act. And I believe she also voted for Lake and Riley Act too. Am I correct on that?
Oh yeah, she voted for removing due process. She's
Hmm.
voted, she's voted for all three National Defense Authorization Acts that have taken place since she's been in Congress. Where the first one removed the ability for women that were active duty to seek out time and repayment for being able to travel out of state if they need reproductive services because they've been stationed in a state that has now outlawed those services. She voted, to limit active duty and guards members' ability to get transgender care through their health coverage. And then they extended that to be that transgender members of active duty and guard families can no longer can get that care through their federal health care coverage. So, it's just been a consistent record of voting to remove people's rights, and that is not what she was elected to do.
Absolutely. And in regards to healthcare, I know you have a personal story whenever it comes to healthcare and why it's critical that we expand access to healthcare, Medicare for all, or universal healthcare, single payer, however we want to frame it. Universal healthcare, it's not just those access to the doctor's appointments. It goes deeper than that. And if you're comfortable with that, I would love for you to share your personal story, whenever it comes to healthcare, um, about your second
Well,
daughter.
but yeah, I mean uh, that's more to the reproductive care access, and that's where in all of my username or not my usernames, my display titles on all my socials, I say I'm 100% pro-choice. My wife at 15 weeks was at work, just normal work day, and started having a massive bleed and got taken to the hospital and it took they didn't know what happened. The bleed stopped, and then she had another bleed and went into the hospital again, and that's when they were trying still weren't sure what was going on, but referred her up to a perinatologist, which is a level of reproductive doctor that's above an OBGYN MD, a specialty that neither my wife or I had ever heard of before. We met with that perinatologist and found out she was having a placental abruption, which is where part of the placenta is detaching, and when it flaps because of movement, a little more terror develops, and that connection is just, the same as any other large scale blood transfer in your body. That's what's feeding and growing the fetus. And we had to kind of sit down and talk about how viable the pregnancy was, what our plans were, how we were going to get through this. And for the next 5 weeks, we had managed. My wife was on bed rest, and it was the morning of her first day of her 20th week of pregnancy when she went into labor at home. And we rushed her to the hospital. They were able to stop the labor. She had an epidural. She had another bleeding episode in during that labor. So she was getting blood transfusions, and we got everything stable. And the doctors and everybody were talking. Okay, what was the plan? We're going to spend the next 15 weeks with her in the hospital. How was this going to go forward? When she developed just the largest bleed that had happened to date, and the perinatologist looked and said, "I'm sorry, you have to choose. You can pray and watch them both die, or You can make a choice right now to intervene. We can save your wife's life. You'll be able to meet your daughter, but she's going to pass away. There's no way at her developmental stage that there's anything we can do to intervene to help. And I made the snap decision. I mean, in the split second. And that was something that I carried with me for years. That was in 2012, but it didn't ring until these current after Dobbs in 2022 and these attacks. And I hear about these laws in these red states where, oh, yeah, but for the mother's safety and for the life of the mother, but they have to check with legal first. We didn't have time. That bleed came on so fast, so intensely, that if they had had to call to a legal department in the middle of the night to try and get a lawyer to decide whether or not she was close enough to meet the legal definition to then allow intervention, she would have died. That's just a simple fact of life. That's what would have happened, but that because we didn't have to do that, she was alive, and we've had two more kids since then. So, reproductive access to me is I can talk to anyone about any situation, and there shouldn't be legislating and leaving exceptions on the other side of the line. We need to leave that topic up to doctors who have taken an oath to do no harm, to do what's right for their patient and the patients. It's just not a thing, these scare tactics that Republicans use of, oh, people at some ridiculously late stage are, just managing to use abortion as birth control. It's not true. But there's multiple medical situations that can come up where time is of the essence, and we don't have time to sit around and let lawyers try and decide whether someone's sick enough. So on that topic, I'm just hard for it. But beyond that, healthcare is just such a universal thing that it should be a right. We need to make it a right in this country. But it just seems so logical to me. And the fact that I had a mother that worked in public health administration and was raised around that topic my entire life at every dinner conversation and group of family friends gatherings were always my mother's coworkers. These topics were front of mind my whole life, and we have the ability to make universal health care possible. In my former job, I traveled around the world as a project manager for the global deployment of Dolby Cinema. And I was in France, and I got a metal splinter in my finger, and my finger swelled up, and I was trying to figure out 9 hours off from our corporate office, trying to get somebody to go, how in the world am I going to use my Blue Cross Blue Shield in France? What do I need to do? Because it happened while I was working. Do I have to do a workman's comp paperwork? What do I need to do? And finally, a French coworker just grabbed me, took me down the street to a doctor's office. We walked in. He said something to the receptionist. She said, oh, I just need you to write your name here. I wrote down my name. A doctor walked out to the waiting room, said, hey, come on back. We went in the back. He looked at it. He made a little incision and then used some tweezers and pulled the metal splinter out, put some Neosporin type topical on it, and put a Band-Aid on it, and then handed me another Band-Aid. And I remember looking at this other Band-Aid with bewilderment, like, what's going on with this? And he's like, well, the swelling's going to go down and you're going to have to change it. And as I'm leaving with this, that was it. That was done. Over at that moment. We just, kind of smiled, said, okay, and headed off. And I left looking at this Band-Aid going, gosh, in America, they would have never given you another Band-Aid. It would have been a big deal. And no, you need to go buy your own Band-Aid, just like anything else in the discharge paperwork. But there, no bill, no letter later that you owe anything. It wasn't a copay, a deductible, and it was just, hey, the doctor will see you now and took care of it. And that's what keeps their costs down. They're not chasing paperwork with, 18 different things and sending it here and sending it there and bill collectors that are, collecting on debt that they can't. It's just ridiculous how our healthcare system works. And we can make the changes, save the American, everyday American money at the end of the day, and ensure that everyone has access to health care that isn't tied to their employment, will allow people to seek out, better jobs, will force companies to, compensate better on their actual salaries because they're going to have to compete because everybody's going to have health care. And that's just a huge deal to me. And it's straightforward. We can do it. And I want to get there and make it a reality.
Absolutely. Brent, thank you for speaking the truth to power because you would think we you would think in 2026 we'd be far more ahead than what we already are, right? And one of the main issues that I'm hearing about whenever I interview other candidates, and this is across the board and across like across the political spectrum, is money in politics. Which again, your incumbent Marie Gluesenkamp Perez is no stranger to whenever it comes to money in politics. And Citizens United gave that power and gave free speech to corporations and to money. And we see that with the influence in our Congress, but it also trickles all the way down to like your local water board. I didn't believe that until I moved into a place that has a water board, and now it makes entire sense to me that we even need like real like bold leaders and like advocates for public health and advocates for water to be on your local water board. I didn't think it was that big of a deal, like I said, until I moved to an area that has a water board. So I was like, okay, yeah, this is important. So whenever it comes to money in politics, what are some of the influences that you see, and how do we go about getting money out of politics? What are some of those steps that we can take to get to that point where we have representatives that actually represent the people and not a corporation, not APAC, etc.?
But I think it's just electing the right people that are going to actually stand up and legislate a solution. That's what we need. The American people want it. They just have to be willing to step away from the incumbents that haven't done it and vote for the alternative candidates that are running saying they're going to do it. Obviously, we have people that get elected that do not follow through on what people believe their campaign promises are or what they say. But we just have to keep taking that step until we get a Congress and a Senate that's ready to do it. And we can get it. And I think we can get it sooner than later. But it's just it takes people standing up and saying, we are actually done with this. We're done with the floods of ads. We're done with not sponsored by any candidate or committee. We had the reforms where everybody had to add, and I'm Brent Hennrich and I approve this message to the end of my ads. Just everybody has to add theirs. But Citizens United brought us this whole thing, not paid for by any candidate or committee. This is brought to you by XYZ PAC. And we need to just stand up and say no more of that. But that's asking people in power to relinquish some of their power and give it back to the people. And that's where I think it's going to take a newer, younger, and just younger in the fact of more freshmen in Congress, new faces, to stand up and say, we're going to change this to make it so that we can get new fresh ideas into this deliberative body. That is the most critical thing is who you're electing and what they stand for. and make sure that, on this topic, that they stand on your side.
100%. Absolutely. And, I think it's worth noting that your current incumbent is also the co-chair of the Blue Dog Coalition, which, is more focused on like centrism and like conservative Democrats. And this is not what we need in 2026 and going forward, because that is exactly what got us into where we are now, Like thinking about that and just, yeah, I just wanted to add that part directly in there. I've been scrolling through Marie's like social media and kind of like looking at it, and I'm seeing people comment and say, I vote for you, or I voted for you. I will never vote for you again. You have turned your back on your district. You have taken all this money from APAC, all this money from all these other corporations, and it's a disaster. And I was like, yeah, and I feel the same way about my current incumbent, which I'm based here in Kansas, and I feel the exact same way about Sharice Davids. I do. And I agree with you whenever it says we need more fresh faces in Congress. Yes, 100%. So, kind of diving in a little bit, and a really big topic right now is the AI data centers that are popping up across the country. And we just saw Utah, where the governor, Spencer Cox, stated that it is a moral obligation to bring these data centers to the state of Utah. And then he also said, I know other states feel the same way. Well, no, we don't need these data centers. They are disastrous, and they're taking up a lot of the local resources. They're driving up utility costs. They're taking water. They are creating like their own like sub climate outside of it because of how much it is actually using. And it's deeply detrimental to marginalized communities that are already living in poverty. We need to address that. We obviously need AI regulation because right now it has no guardrails. And I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily against AI, but the way that we're seeing it and in its current state, I can't get behind it. You know what I mean? And so, what are some of those concerns that you're hearing as far as like the AI data centers in your district?
Well, I think the most that I'm hearing is that, people are scared of the Republican suggestions where right now Republican Congress want to, put some protections for the people against AI in at the federal level, but wanted to mandate that state and localities beyond that can do no further regulation. That cannot be allowed to go into law. We need to make sure that the federal government is doing what it can to protect people's jobs from AI. That the copyright issues, the revenge porn issues, that we are putting up serious strict walls and punishments for that technology being used in those ways. But beyond that, we absolutely need to encourage and support that the local governments can make decisions that are right for them and their constituents. They can move faster and they can make, broader, quicker changes to control those things. But right now, Republicans, with my incumbent support, have been trying to repeal the environmental rules on zoning and what needs to be done prior to construction projects happening, purely which seems like to make it easier for data centers to be built. And I strongly disagree with that.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. And thinking about like mental health, and I know we're going to kind of like pivot here, but thinking about mental health and mental health access, I'm thinking more specifically of like rural areas, but just across the country, just thinking about the lack of mental health access. And I learned a couple years ago about a story that I believe it's based out of Washington, and Jesse Sari, Sarey, and he was experiencing mental health issues and homelessness at the time. And on May 31st, 2019, he was brutally murdered by Auburn officer Jeff Nelson. Whenever it comes to mental health access, what do you propose whenever you are elected to Congress, how we address mental health and how we expand access? Because it comes down to funding. And we know that these budget cuts have been deeply disastrous. Doge comes in and starts whacking all of these, like, quote unquote DEI grants and the attacks on just marginalized communities. But what do you propose as far as mental health goes and how do we expand access?
Well, I mean, we all remember the nursery song that we sang at some point during our early childhood education of head, shoulders, knees, and toes. And that's what we need for healthcare. We need healthcare to understand that that's mental health, that that's vision, that that's dental, that all these things play into your overall health and well-being. So I want to make sure whatever we're doing for universal healthcare, is pretty much if it's comprised within your birthday suit of skin, that that is healthcare. And we need to make sure that we start treating socially these issues as though they're healthcare because right now we don't. We treat people with bad teeth as though there's some sort of behavioral thing there. People with mental health issues as somehow different or something that they may be able to control. They're just not disciplined enough. That people with thick glasses, get made fun of. Why don't they have contacts? Well, contacts are expensive, and people with really heavy prescriptions, have even further problems because some prescriptions get, to the point where contacts can't really correct them, well enough. So, I think that we just need to make sure that when it comes to mental health care, we start with the baseline of mental health care is health care. We know we need more providers and that these disastrous cuts the Trump administration has done that have targeted mental health they just need to be undone. And we need to do our best to get those therapists and practitioners back to practicing to help, communities. But we need to help our students, that are in school now move forward into careers where they can be a therapist, psychologist, or psychiatrist that we need to help have, a healthy mental health uh, overall population. So a lot of it comes to we need to destigmatize it, but that comes by just treating it as though it's any other cut, bruise, or issue that a person may have that you don't physically see, on the outside. People have cancer that affects them. That they look the same. They're all these things. We need to just treat it like it's healthcare so that the fact is that socially it gets understood and treated that way instead of this I'm scared of it mentality that so many have, especially police officers.
Exactly. 100%. Thank you for adding that very last part into that because it's absolutely critical that we address that. Thank you for doing that. Are you familiar with the Washington State Coalition Against Domestic Violence?
I can say that I've heard of it, but I have not met with them or sat down and had discussions.
So as of 2020, they released, and they also, and I know they've been tracking it a lot longer, but this is going off of 2020 data. The Washington State Domestic Violence Fatality Review keeps track of deaths related to intimate partner violence including homicides, suicides, and people killed by police responding to domestic violence. And they found that a 2016 study of 812 incidents of fatal police shootings in 17 states found that 13.9% were related to intimate partner violence. Of 163 police shootings in Washington state during 2015 to 2019, the DVFR identified 22 or 13.5% related to intimate partner violence. Thinking about this, first of all, what's your reaction whenever you hear about
I just
this?
want to clarify here. You're saying that it was a police involved shooting and that the officer was a partner of the person they shot, or you're saying that they were called to something where there was a partner dispute and the police officer ended up shooting. I'm just trying to clarify what your statistic is.
Correct. This is directly from the website. And yes, it would be about the police officer shooting and killing or shooting while responding to that call, which is related to
Okay, I
domestic
just wanted to make,
violence.
I wasn't sure if you were saying okay, no, that clarifies. Okay. So ask your question again.
Whenever you hear about whenever you hear about police shootings, and in like all different instances, we've seen it with George Floyd, we've seen it with, Dante Wright, we've seen it with Breonna Taylor. How do we begin to address police violence as acts of violence?
Well,
I know this
I
is
think that
this is very complex.
it is complex, and this is going to get picked apart and taken out of context. So I'm
Mhm.
trying to put it as clearly, and we absolutely need to work on training of our police officers. They need more funding so they can have more training. We need more continuing education training for our police officers, but we need more training at the academy level. We absolutely need to uh, get it to where de-escalation is the number one, and I believe that it is the most important and number one thing that we need to push for. And it's something that we can do in Congress as far as tying funding to, departments being required to have done certain amounts of training and certain amounts going forward. And if they don't keep with that, that they no longer get the additional funding. And I think, as the office I'm running for, the number one thing we have control of is budgets. And so I would want to see that we're able to use that power there. I mean, to say that, you know, the police violence versus person to person violence and statistic numbers on it, there's going to be violence, as long as humans exist, but we know that that amount goes down with more interactions and more experiences outside of a person's bubble, when they are able to see things from a different angle, because they've been exposed to it, and to be get people exposed to it in situations where they're not, in fear for their life. And so again, I think that comes down to training, and that's the number one thing that we have to push on and insist as citizens, as members of a community, that we're electing sheriffs and we are, working with our city councils on when they're, hiring police chiefs, but that we're holding them accountable to say we expect this level of professionalism and we expect to not have these stories because we want them to not happen. Not that we don't want it reported, we just want it to not happen in the first place, and we have to work on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on this. Now, let's kind of dive in and talk about peace and foreign policy, which I know you talk about on your platform. So I'd love for you to expand on this. And, there's a lot going on, like across the country, but also across the entire world right now. We have a genocide in Gaza, against the Palestinian people that we continue to send money and weapons and a number of different things. And we see the APAC influence in Congress. How do we go about addressing this? And how do we go about recognizing that genocide is genocide?
Well, right now, I mean, the United States needs to stop funding Israel's military and enabling the genocide that's happening in Gaza. That falls on Congress. I blame that this is obviously being perpetrated by Israel, but it's the United States Congress that's sending money there, and so we have some blame. And I will not vote to send that money. So that's number one. But right now, foreign policy problems is we've got an illegal war in Iran happening, and we're not voting as Congress to remove the funding for that and stop that. So we need to make sure that we're going to elect people that will do that. We do not need to get into more Middle East forever wars over oil. It's played out, it's done. We know what happens. We know we send soldiers to die. We know we get to basically nowhere out of it. We call it regime change. Then we say, oh, that didn't work out so great. Okay, now it's time to leave, destabilize it again, and it's a cycle that for some reason this administration is deciding to start over again in Iran. I stand 100% against it. It is crushing working families right now with the cost of gas, the cost of diesel being through the roof, causing the costs of everyday goods to go up because of transporting those goods. We're seeing it. We're seeing it in the checkout line every day right now. And this is directly attributed to the fact of that we've started this ridiculous war, and it's going to cost us triple because not only are we paying right now at the grocery store and the clothing store and everywhere else, we are adding that money that this is costing to our national debt in the cost of what the military is spending just to be there. So we need to get control as Congress of what's going on. We need the military and the Department of Defense needs to figure out how to pass an audit. They've never passed an audit. We need them to pass an audit. We need to adjust their budget, no question. The national debt is ridiculous. It's way out of control. We know that one step we can take right now is undo the 2017 and the 2026 or 2025 Trump tax cuts for the rich, but we also have to limit our spending on the military that has just peaked at $1.5 trillion dollars. And the person I'm running against voted for that budget. It's crazy.
Absolutely, 100%. And do you see a common denominator here? And it's people are not recognizing what's truly happening and not realizing that every single election matters, not only just for your district, but what you do is going to impact the entire country, and also it impacts a lot of around the world too. It's yes, 100%. Thank you for being transparent and talking about this and bringing up some very key points that I was hoping that you were going to hit. So thinking about just everything else, What are some of the other things that you will bring to Congress that you believe will make our lives way better than they are right now? I know this is another complex question, but
Actually, I think it's kind of easy. I think it's that I am ready to work and I'm ready to compromise and work with anyone.
Mhm,
But compromise does not include compromising my morals or
mhm,
compromise any other human's rights. So that's off the table, but everything else is on it. Let's get to work. Let's get infrastructure rolling in rural parts, in red parts, in blue parts, in metro areas. Let's do what the government is supposed to do, which is those big things that private industry can't, won't, isn't interested in. Let's make sure that rural broadband actually happens. There's been this talk about rural broadband, rural broadband, and it's a football that keeps getting thrown around. Yet I drive from where I'm located, just north of Portland, Oregon, in Vancouver, Washington, and when I'm driving out to the beach, which is part of my district in Long Beach, I drive down the highway and there's an orange pole every like 1,000 feet. There's an orange pole. That orange pole is the main line of the internet that goes from Portland to Longview to Seattle and then branches and goes out and brings the internet to the coast. The farmers and the families that live on the land with those orange poles in their yard
yeah,
do not have
fair.
access to the internet. And that is unacceptable. We need to take back the rights to that stuff and re-give it out to companies that will actually get people connected to rural broadband. We need to be spending on rural healthcare infrastructure. We need people, whether you're in the city or whether you're living in a population center, but that's, removed from the heart of town, to have access to good healthcare and good emergency services. We know that. We know that it costs more than in town. So the government needs to up and say, okay, this is something that needs to be here, there, and everywhere. And we put it in and we subsidize the cost. It's just something we need to do. Private industry is not going to do it. We see them closing health centers, closing down, pharmacies, closing down, single doctor, locations, offices all the time. We need to invest in those things. We have roads and bridges crumbling all around on the interstate freeway system, up just north of where I live, but in the heart of my district. We have flooding along the Cowlitz and Lewis rivers that happens every few years, and it's devastation every time it happens. We need to build the flood mitigation systems and levees and the like to be able to control that and to protect those constituents. Those things are going to be good job creation. They're going to stimulate the economy, and they're going to get things done that no private industry is ever going to do. So I want to make sure that we're concentrating on those things that are going to take us forward.
You said a key thing that is to take us forward. And we set the country backwards, whenever we overturn or the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. And just thinking about that, thank you for first of all for running and representing the people and also raising a lot of flags about things that need to continue changing and we need to continue pushing forward and continue working toward. Now, the last question is how can people contribute to your campaign and uplift the work that you are doing?
Well, it's really easy. My website is the letter BH, the number 4C.com. You can go there and learn more about me. And there's a donate button, of course, all over on that page where easily findable to donate. Or if you want, and you're hearing this, and you're just like, I want to donate directly right now, you can go to bh4c.win. That'll take you directly to my Act Blue page where you can make a contribution. Every bit helps. We are grassroots. We are not taking a penny of corrupt corporate PAC money, not 1 cent from APAC. We are doing this, together as best we can. I have a total of two max dollar donors to date. One being Don Henley from the Eagles. So everybody, please continue to support the Eagles as Don Henley keeps trying to raise and help progressive voices in this country. Beyond that, please volunteer. On my website, there's a volunteer tab. We could use phone bankers from all over the country. We could use people writing postcards to voters. We're getting activated with our ground game here, and we're starting to knock doors. So, we could use all the help we could get, but money is always a key thing. We're proud to be able to say in the first quarter of this year, while we were massively outraised by the incumbent had $920,000 in transfers from other PACs and committees, and only had $43,000 in small dollar donations. We had 63,000 in small dollar donations. So we know that the everyday voting member is hearing our message and it's resonating, but we also know we have a lot of work to do, that people, don't pay attention to politics as close as those that listen to this podcast or that follow me on socials. So we've got to get our name out there. We've got to educate people to know the current representatives' voting record. And we're doing that every day. Costs money, and your help will make it a reality.
Absolutely. Brent, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I look forward to calling you the next congressman out of Washington. I'm so excited. I was really grateful whenever you responded to come on this podcast. I was so excited. I've been following you for a bit. I love your platform. I love the social media that you were doing. I just love everything about your campaign. And I greatly appreciate you for representing the people. I truly thank you.
Well, I thank you for your time and for letting me come here and share my message. And we're gonna have a blue 26. We know that. We just want it to be a real strong,
Mhm.
real actual Democrats at the end of the day. Democrats have said vote blue no matter who for decades now, and I've said no, no. We need to stop that. We vote blue, but it matters who. We need actual Democrats that are going to stand up, and I'm proud to say I'm one of them.
Absolutely. I agree. Thank you so much, Brent. Please take care of yourself out there.
Thank you.